understand why and why you have the views you have. It takes some of the charge out of the conversation. The other thing we do is it gets to the point of we acknowledge that everyone has blind spots, areas where they simply don't see something. And that's not a way of excusing, you know, we're not saying that there's no such thing as racism or sexism or classism, but sometimes what happens is that we literally, the way we view things, we just don't see that. And it happened to me when I first moved out here, and I was putting together a fault lines panel, and I grew up in New York, and so my blind spot is geography. I put together what I thought was that it crossed geography, it crossed gender. It was a brilliant panel. And my boss, Steve Montiel, looked at it and said, where are the Asians? Where are the Latinos? And I realized that it was a geographic blind spot. 10 years, 15 years ago when I was doing this in New York, or on the East Coast, when you talked about race, back then you did it primarily in terms of black or white. So it wasn't as if I was trying to be exclusionary, I simply didn't see something. I would never make that mistake again, but it's one of the reasons we need to be able to facilitate those kind of conversations within our classrooms, within the faculty meetings, so that everybody can be aware of where their blind spots are, where they need to work harder to become inclusive, and we also need to be able to have conversations that are somewhat embracing and gives room for people making mistakes. Sometimes you have to be honest, you have to bite your tongue and ask them, what do you mean? And get past your first reaction, which sometimes is not, is a little impatient, is one way of putting it. And really draw the person out. And then also not, you know, and say, well, from my fault line perspective, here's the way I see this issue. And to go back and to really make sure, and to find other ways, other bridges that you can sort of say, well, have you looked at it from this point of view, and try to make equations that people aren't always able to make in their mind because they don't have the experience. And so you just have to keep going over it. And it is not easy. And sometimes you want to, but that's what you have to run for. That's one of the ways that we actually use the fault lines, is we give people a story, and we hope it's not a story when we're doing our training. We hope it's not a story that's on race or gender. We break them into teams, assign each group a fault line, and then have them come up with angles from their assigned fault lines, so that they get used to including everybody across race, class, gender, generation, and geography in every story. Be it something on elections, or simply gas coverage, or man on the street.
What I think is worth thinking about, and it's true in all of these areas of diversity that we're talking about, is students are coming into the classroom in many cases, if they themselves are not a member of any one of these groups that we're talking about, they know people who are, and I think that they must think that it's a little weird to be in a classroom where what they know to be the world, whether they know it because of the media that Felix mentioned, or their own experience, or whatever it is, to come into a classroom that seems so sanitized. And it's just something that I wonder about, which is, why aren't students who do know what the world looks like more than they are being shown in the classroom, why aren't they, I don't know, why aren't they more out there and saying something about it? So it's not a question I have an answer to, but it's something that I have wondered about. And maybe that's the New Yorker in me that thinks, like, why aren't people screaming and yelling and demanding things? But I just think that that's a piece of this that often doesn't get discussed, and I think it needs to be. NLGJA, the organization that I'm here representing, was so thrilled when finally sexual orientation got added to the diversity standard, and I don't want to downplay it, because I think it is a real accomplishment, and I think it's better for it to be there than not. But, you know, about 2 seconds after that, after, you know, we sort of celebrated that achievement, you know, it became clear that, oh, the downside is what everyone is here talking about, which is that it's a diversity standard that is not as equal as others. And so at first, for a short period of time, you know, a year ago, I would have said, well, the reason to include LGBT content in the classroom and to have it be part of the diversity standard is because you have to now, so that's the reason. I think that's the worst reason. I think the reason has been touched on by other people on the panel, which is that, I mean, I can give you a long laundry list, but I'll just pick one issue, the marriage issue. I mean, that is an issue that is being that is being covered and is sort of erupting in places that are not just, you know, the top 5 urban centers in this country. In fact, that's actually one of the things about the marriage issue, is that it's coming up in adoption contexts, family contexts, all over the place, and students who are sent out there at their first job or their second job or whatever it is, that's just one issue. And again, I can name a bunch of others, but a lot of them right now are kind of family-related issues that they need to be prepared to cover. They need to be able to know. They don't need to know everything about it, but they need to know at least where they can turn to find authoritative sources, basic information, and that's true about all the things that we're all here talking about. Everything I have to say mirrors what everybody else on this panel has to say. And I don't have a book to plug, but I do have a website to plug, and that is, we have one of the more difficult acronyms to remember, but it's NLGJA, National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association.org. And we have something called the Leroy F. Ahrens Journalism Education Program. And if you click on that link, what you will find there is a whole host of resources. One of them, Sally mentioned, called the Educator's Toolbox, which has a number of things for classroom use. I'll just mention a couple. We have a style book supplement, which a lot of people have found very useful. It's basically sort of a supplement like that you could use with the AP Style Guide. We also have, and this is actually my favorite part of it, we have case studies, articles that have been written and some suggested questions for classroom discussion. So that's something that can be used in the classroom. But the other thing that you'll find there that you may want to pass along to your students is there's a whole host of opportunities for students themselves. We have a fantastic student project at our annual convention, just to give you one example, where we take something like 15 to 20 students and they spend the weekend doing either print or online or TV production at our convention. We have a student award, we have scholarships, we have lots of things that are useful, not just for educators, but for students themselves. So I hope you'll take a look at that. But really, I just think that the reason to include LGBT issues and subject matter in teaching and in all the other areas where diversity comes up is that, you know, my reasons are no different than the reasons that everybody else on this panel would say that it's important to make sure that we are doing these things. I mean, this has been an issue in LGBT coverage for a long time, is, you know, why can't there just be people who happen to be gay or lesbian in stories that are otherwise about something else? And actually, that has started to happen more. Now I'm so sick of seeing 2 men in the New York Times real estate section in their fabulous apartment that I long for the good old days when there was no mainstreaming. But anyway, I mean, that's you know, that's an issue that has been around for a while, at least on the sexual orientation side of things. And you know, I guess I would just say I endorse that as one of the goals. I don't think these things have to be mutually exclusive. I mean, I think that one of the things, and this may just be personal to me, but this idea that we, whoever the we may be, are just like everybody else, so why can't we be covered that way? I think that only goes so far. I also think that tends to sort of homogenize everybody, and in fact, in a lot of ways, we, however you choose to define your we, are not in every way like everybody else. And this has actually come up a lot, I think, this has actually come up a lot in coverage of the marriage issue on the LGBT side. One of the things that has gotten lost because of the tendency to sort of mainstream everybody is there is a large group of LGBT people who are not necessarily pro-marriage or for whom this is not the big burning issue of the day. But you wouldn't know that because that hasn't gotten coverage because because it's skewed toward we just want to be like everybody else and get married. And so I guess I'm just saying I don't think these things have to be mutually exclusive. I think it would be great if LGBT people were included in Father's Day stories could sometimes